Live. You're listening to Live with Men, the podcast.
But yeah, this is Men, the podcast. Karibu tena na asante sana kwa kutusikiliza. On Twitter, @Men, the podcast. And on Instagram, @Men, the podcast. Mimi naitwa Michael Baruti. Nadi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm great. Feeling good.
Going back to school, I heard.
Yes, I'm going back to school.
Why?
Well, learning never ends. So we will continue to learn until we die. So this is just part of that process.
You don't sound too happy about it, though. You don't sound too happy about it, though.
Learning in a government institution in Tanzania, it has its challenges. Thankfully, I'm a psychologist, so I'll be able to sort myself out along the way. But yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, so that's Nadia, a therapist/counselor ambaye tunakuwa naye kwenye every week episode yetu ya Men, the podcast. Na kama unataka kuwasiliana naye, unaweza kumcheck through Twitter and Instagram @MindMattersTZ, @MindMattersTZ. And then unaenda kwenye link ya kwenye bio yake ambayo itakupeleka moja kwa moja kwenye website yake ambayo utapata namna ya kuweza kuwasiliana naye kwa urahisi na kwa ubora zaidi. Other than that, thank you for listening to Men, the podcast, and let's enjoy the ride today. We are recording this episode on the 25th of November 2020 ambayo ndio inaanzia ile 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Kwa Kiswahili tunasema siku 16 za kupinga ukatili wa kijinsia. Na leo we are actually recording this episode kwenye nyumba ya balozi wa Sweden nchini Tanzania, Mr Anders. The last name is a little bit how do you say your last name?
My full name is Anders Sjöberg.
Sjöberg.
Yes. Oh, perfect.
Hongera sana. Asante sana. Tuko kwenye residence yake na tumekuja hapa kuzungumzia mambo mengi sana. I did my research and apparently Sweden is doing a lot of things when it comes to addressing gender-based violence in Tanzania. So it was just a great opportunity for us to meet. So thank you. So Anders, why should men be involved on addressing gender-based violence?
Well, I think this is one of the most important questions that we have before us, and one of the big issues I think with gender-based violence is that it's the women that have become victimized, while the actual role and responsibility lies among men as individuals, I would say, because we are all different. But we as men, we need to have this conversation among us. Why gender-based violence is something that is very, very wrong and which is actually a criminal offense. So we as men, we need to address it and to talk with other men and have this conversation going until this pandemic disappears from this planet. Because it's really a pandemic. It's not only here in Tanzania, it's in Sweden. It's in every country of the world. And it's, of course, related to, unbalanced power structures, gender inequalities, and so forth. That this menace is popping up in all societies.
Mm-hmm. And so, how long have you been in Tanzania?
I've been here for a little bit more than 2 years now. I came here the very first time in 1990. I paid a visit to Zanzibar for a full week. I was doing some work in Kenya. So then I came back a little bit in the early 90s, and then since 2018 I'm the ambassador to Tanzania. And of course this country has changed a lot since my very first visit here 30 years ago. So it's amazing to see the progress that the country has been making during these years.
When you try to compare where you come from and the men in your country, where you come from, and the men in Tanzania, what are the similarities you see and the differences as well when it comes to addressing gender-based violence?
Well, I think you see similarities and you see differences. I think if we look at the similarities, and I was thinking before coming to this pod, I mean, what is universal and what is cultural? But I think you have to make that distinction, because some male or masculine behavior is universal in man respect. So there is a tendency that men are, they are expected to be strong. They are, manhood has a lot of connotations, and I think you would find a lot of similarities between Tanzanian and Swedish men. I think if you look at the difference, men in Sweden, I would say since my father became a father, which was in the early 60s, I think men have moved into the space of women, and I think that women have moved into the spaces of men. So it's more of an interlinkage, both professionally, academically, but also in the household, in the families.
Do you think that one of the causes or one of the things that are causing this the pandemic of gender-based violence is the fact that both men and women have actually moved into each other's spaces without maybe not being prepared for that to happen? Especially for men, do you think like we were not prepared for the case of women moving into our space, like what you just said?
Well, I think it's hard to be prepared, perhaps, but I think it's in our case, and now I talk about Sweden. I think that has been an evolution. So it has been a gradual shift where we have, let's say, we men, we have taken greater responsibility for in our homes, both when it comes to what I just learned, they call the second shift. I mean, the unpaid labor you do in your house every day, that in traditionally women have done most of the, taking care of the home, the kids and everything. I think that we have become more equal in Sweden, but it's far from equal. We still have that gender differences between us. And in the workspace, we see actually we have more young female students now. They are outperforming the male students in universities. So we see that the women are really taking ground in both academic and professional life.
So there's this summit that's happening in Arusha right now, which is called the ULID. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine is actually attending the event. Given yesterday, he tweeted like he feels like come 2030, more women will be in better places professionally than men. And he said he feels like men are not prepared for that. And his take was, if we think it's worse now for men, then it's gonna be even worse come 2030. Mm-hmm. If we don't do something about it as men. He insisted actually on the thing of, now we are talking about saving a girl child. Come 2030, we'll be having major campaigns on saving boy child. You actually think that's possible? It might happen.
No, I think, when I meet and also when we recruit, we had one opening in our embassy right now, and we had 2,500 applicants for that position, and highly competitive professional that applied for that position, and the winner was a woman. She got hired. So we see that I think on the short list, 7 out of 10 were women that were shortlisted for this position. So we see that women are coming big way here in Tanzania as well, and that makes me very optimistic about the future, because I see so many talented and strong and entrepreneurial women in this country.
We did a session a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, Men Let's Talk events. The intention was to have only men come in and let's try to unpack and understand more about toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. And the findings were quite interesting for me. So we asked people like, what are the characteristics of a good man? What makes a person a good man? And then people started talking things like empathy, understanding, considerate. They talked about good stuff about men, or at least what they think a good man is. So, and then the interesting part, now we asked them, okay, what are the characteristics of a real man? These same people, they started talking about things like he needs to have multiple partners. Yes, real talk. He needs to be able to put a woman on her place, You don't let a woman get over your head. Should be able to seduce women, So my take on this was that, so this is what people aspire to be, as in they aspire to be good men. The society has taught them a complete different things to what makes a real man. What role does a society play in terms of enabling toxic masculinity? And do you think there's a way that we can actually go and start to unpack and learn and readdress that?
It's a very complex issue, I said, and then as I would like to say, and when you look at this, it's very easy to be sort of boxed into a mailbox, and that you have expectations that you should say certain things, and I think this could be very nation-specific or culture-specific or workplace specific. So, I'm not sure that the examples you gave, that they would say that the very same men would give these epithet to if they were in a different context in the workplace. But this was in, when they were together with other men, they were, so you can come into a situation that you start to brag about things, or you try to say, things that you might expect the others to like, but it's nothing that is inside yourself. See what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think men and women, every human being, we need to challenge ourselves, our norms and our values. But since we're talking about gender-based violence, right? I think men as a category needs to challenge itself and its norms and the standards that they set them for themselves. And the way to come around this, of course, it's to talk about it, but I think it's also about education in starting from early age. We are very fortunate in Sweden. We can afford the luxury, I would say, to have we have preschool teaching for almost every kid. So the enrollment rate is 80-90% from 2-3 years and upwards. And within the families, but also within the preschool, you can have more sort of structured teaching, and it's also part of the curriculum in these preschools that we should talk about gender, and not gender per se, because kids are probably too small to understand gender, but to talk about the norms and how to integrate girls and boys more. And of course this training and this education needs to continue and becomes perhaps even more important when you reach teenage.
Yeah, so it's really good that from an early age these children are being taught about gender differences and gender equality. Even though it's not direct, it's indirect. It means that these ideals, these perspectives are ingrained in them from an early age. And so it becomes easier in the long run even to have a balanced society where there perhaps more understanding of equality, there's better understanding of gender, and people are living in more of a harmony.
Yeah, well,
and of course this is sort of, I call it a luxury, because it's really luxury, because that you can afford to have kids spending so much time on learning from early age.
But do you think we should build empathy maybe? That might help?
Empathy is a big thing. So when we want people to understand a perspective or a worldview that is not their own, empathy comes and plays a big role there. Because if I don't know the experiences you're having, I don't know the world, how you're experiencing the world, then it will be difficult for me to take your feelings, your preferences in consideration. But when we're teaching empathy, we're teaching the boy child to get into the shoes of the girl child, to see the world from the girl child's perspective, to see what struggles or what challenges that they face. And at the same time, we're also teaching the girl child to put themselves in the boy child's shoes, to understand the worldview from that boy child. And so in that instance, we're basically teaching these humans to understand one another, because we're different. Biologically, women and men are very different. Yes, we have a lot of similarities, but then there are these differences that we cannot deny. There's innate differences between women and men. This is just the biological. And then when we speak about gender, there are differences in gender roles as well. So when we talk about masculinity and we talk about femininity, these two are also quite different characteristics. So once we get people to understand and put themselves in the other's shoes, then we're slowly building that empathy. We're building that understanding. And we're broadening the worldview of these boy childs and the girl childs. And after that, we're in a better space to treat each other basically better, because we're understanding where the other is coming from. So right now, we find that people have poor understanding of the challenges and struggles that women face, and of the struggles and challenges that men face. And so we're in a space where we're just guarding ourselves and defending ourselves. And so both sides are doing the same thing. This is where the conflict now is emerging, because we're all standing our ground, and we're not a lot of us. And when I say we're all, I'm talking about the majority. There's a minority group that are trying to understand. But because we're all standing our ground, that's why there is this conflict. It's like two bulls locked in horns. So empathy is an important thing. If we teach that, we're halfway there.
If I could comment on this, I think this, because it's what do you say? I fully support. But a couple of things I would like to add is that I think, and it comes with parenthood. It's about creating role models, lead by example. Because if you can demonstrate that you can change yourself, then you can also become a role model for your kids, but also for maybe other family members or friends or whatever, and that you're there stepping out of that man box and be someone else. Second point you also made, which I would like to reinforce, is on we spend most of our time in institutions, it's school, workplace, university or whatnot. And one of the contributions that we have been doing here is the Femina Hip girls clubs around Tanzania. And that also creates safe space for girls and boys to talk about things that they might not dare talking about in the normal space. So within the institution you can attach bubbles or clubs where you can have these conversations in a structured way.
Your country has a feminist policy, which I think is a huge thing in addressing things like gender equality and all that. How long did it take for your country to get there, and at what cost did you have to achieve that?
I think the economic benefits have been tremendous from doing this. So it's so if you only look at the economic result, it has been quite remarkable. So we got universal suffrage. I mean, women got the right to vote in exactly 100 years ago in 1920-21. I would say from there and onwards it took off. So we had a lot of social reforms already in the 1930s, where we opened up the kindergarten, as it was called then, but the preschool activities, small scale, not big scale. Then after the Second World War, when industrialization took off, we saw a huge demand for women in the workforce. So a lot of women entered into the workforce, and that's where where things start to happen. Then we had other social reforms, parental leave reform, which was in the 70s, and it has sort of been upgraded throughout. So now I think you get more than 450 days per kid, and a certain percentage, I don't recall exactly how much, should go to the father. But you can share that 450 plus days equally among the man or the woman could get the bigger portion of these days. So all these reforms have made us to be a more inclusive, equal society. And we already discussed about women now excelling in their academic performances. So we see that gradually women are overtaking, not in all sectors, but in many sectors we see that women are overtaking men, which is a very promising sign that our gender equality policy has worked. And since 2014 we have a feminist foreign policy. We also have a feminist government. The feminist foreign policy is to give direction to us diplomats and to give guidance for our policy priorities when we work abroad. And we are promoting the feminist foreign policy throughout the world, and it's very simple, but also utterly complex. But it's about 3 R's basically. So it's about resources, rights, and representation. So by addressing these 3 R's, and we can see a lot that is not equal at all, inequalities between in all these 3 segments. But by addressing them from a structural way, we hope that we can help to promote gender equality. And if we look at the resources in a country like Tanzania, they are, it's very skewed to the advantage of men. Same could be land rights, it could be access to funds, could be access to education, could be any resource that it's very unbalanced. The same with representation. We see it both at the higher levels, but also in local societies.
Yeah, so it brings me back to what I always say. What you just said in terms of the allocation of resources and opportunities and all that, it has always favored men. And then it brings me back to my next question is, why should men actually care about addressing these issues while they feel like these things are, they're working for them? So why should actually men care?
I would argue that, if we work together, women and men and people from different backgrounds, different ages, if we work as a team, we become much more clever collectively than if it's very one-sided, it's only young people or old people or men or women. But as a team, we become much more productive and smarter. So the more we can share our experience, our professionalism, and bring different perspectives into the picture, the more output we will get collectively.
So as I'd also read somewhere that this year, especially 2020, with the COVID pandemic, lockdown happening pretty much everywhere in the world. Also, Tanzania, we did not have a lockdown as a country, but people were taught to work from home. And then there was a trend that started to happen, which is the increase in numbers, cases of gender-based violence. Like the numbers just went up. But then, if you look in the bigger picture, it actually shows that there's still a need to actually express and talk more about gender-based violence. So, and there's been a lot of initiatives, and I feel like some changes are still happening, at least in urban settings. Right now, you cannot just go out and start chasing or beating women and, out in public and expect people to be okay with it. So in a country like ours, in a country like Tanzania, what do you think can be done? Because I think the whole gender-based violence is directly related to mental health. Directly related.
I think it's important to call a spade a spade.
Yes.
Because it's a criminal offense, right?
It is.
So if you go out and beat someone, no matter who you are or why you do it or whatever background you have or whatnot, it's still a criminal offense. And any perpetrator should be brought to justice, and it should be put in front of the court. And I've discussed this with many Tanzanians, and they are exactly the same opinion that this is a criminal offense.
But
it needs to be dealt with as a criminal offense.
But can we look at the root cause? I always say, I think if you know better, you do better. Do you feel like a lot of people do not know any better? That's why they resort to violence. Now, is there a way for us to actually go and start addressing the root cause? Reporting a criminal offense, that means it has happened already.
Yeah.
And probably someone has lost their lives, or they lost an eye, or, probably. It might be a little bit too late. Now, is there a way for us to address the root cause and, as in, go back to before it even starts and start addressing that?
I fully agree, of course. I mean, you need to address the root causes, and root causes are different in different societies and perhaps also different regions of Tanzania. I mean, we have the harmful practices of FGM in certain parts of Tanzania, and of course, again, it's a criminal offense, but it also has root causes, traditional beliefs and practices that needs to be addressed, and we need to have conversations about it, and we also need to enlighten people why this is a bad practice. And I'm not talking about FGM in particular, but I mean anything that cause harm to another human being, be it a woman, a child, or any other group.
What are some of the work that you've done, your nation has done in Tanzania when it comes to addressing gender-based violence? Can you talk about that a little bit?
So we are working with around 20 NGOs around the country. One of the most prominent ones being Legal and Human Rights Center. They have a lot of paralegals that are reaching out to women. In particular, it could be divorce, it could be land rights issues, and often there is a component of gender-based violence in all this. So it's by supporting these grassroots paralegals and organizations, that's a very direct contribution to assisting women in particular around the country. And we do a lot of networking here at the Swedish residence, where we invite people from women to discuss and to talk about these issues. But I also realized that we need to invite more men because it's about men. It's not really a women issue, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So maybe we should start a little network, you and me.
Yes,
Michael, what do you see?
I am down for that.
Well, yes, I think it's high time that men actually also got involved in these movements, because when you look at it, a lot of women are in these spaces. A lot of women are taking an active role, are being very, very active, are taking the initiative to make changes happen, to end a lot of these practices, to create some balance and equality between the genders. But there aren't a lot of men in those domains. So by having few men engaged, basically that translates to, this is a women's problem, and so we don't really have to do anything about it. It's a them problem. So it becomes an us and them situation, which also creates a divide between the two. So by having men involved, they get to see, one, the role that they play in perpetuating those issues, but also, most importantly, they see what role they can play in eliminating those problems, in the solution. Because if they're left out, if men are left out, then we continue feeling removed and detached from the issues that women are facing. But if men are in the mix, men are involved in these movements, men are having these active conversations, men start taking active roles in ending gender-based violence, in taking care of their own mental health, then men, basically that translates to, I have the power and I have a role to play in this, in creating these solutions, in ending this pandemic, of gender-based violence. So it's important to start having men actively engaged and get them to be part of the solution, rather than just viewing men as the problem, but not telling them or not getting them involved to see, okay, how can you move from being a problem to being a solution? Because then we're really not doing much if we're still keeping those divides. So yes, high time. Men, let's talk. Let's get involved. Let's take an active role.
I would like to hear your experience on toxic masculinity. Have you ever been in a situation, Anders, where you felt like this is toxic masculinity playing tricks on me, or I have to do this thing because if I don't do it, other men wouldn't understand, that kind of thing? Have you ever been in that situation?
I try to remember, but it's nothing that comes straight to my mind. Maybe in my youthhood, when I was a teenager, could very well be, but it nothing, doesn't, I don't have any striking example that I could share with you. But I'm absolutely certain that it has happened to me many times, and often when you are in, or maybe those years when you are in. For instance, when you do the military service or something, you are in a sort of very male-dominated, masculine environment, and some of these what you call toxic masculinity could kick in. But I cannot come up with any such concrete example at the moment.
Yeah, and as a diplomat, as an ambassador, what are you doing to ensure a safe space for men where you work?
I would say a lot. I mean, we try to be a workplace where we treat each other equally, and that we try to have a transparent workspace where we should allow different voices to come out, but also frown on bad behavior, condescending behaviors. So of course, and I think this is be it the workplace or any other situation, you need to be constantly be very vigilant that you have that you don't normalize jargon or any misbehavior among staff or colleagues.
You talked about having a little bit of a testimony before we got here.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we are very fortunate in Sweden because we have these 450 plus days of parental leave, and this is also partly, not fully, but partly implemented in the Foreign Service. So for our locally employed staff, they be either if they're a man or a woman, when they become parents, they are entitled to have a 6-month parental leave.
Paid leave.
Paid leave, yeah. I don't know if it's full paid. I would have to check that, but I mean it's paid leave. Yes. So which implies that our male and female colleagues could, spend full 6 months and paying full attention to their newborn. So, and of course, this is something that is very much appreciated among our staff members, and that they see as a real benefit to work for us. And it's
when are you hiring?
Yeah, it's a sign. It's we want to really emphasize that we walk the talk. I mean, we are promoting our feminist foreign policy, the 3 R's: rights, resources, and representation. But then we also need to walk the talk in our own organization. We cannot. So we are providing this sort of rather generous parental leave possibility for our staff members. So the background to this testimony is that we had a conversation similar to this among some good colleagues in the embassy, and then one of the colleagues here returned back a couple of days later with a testimony in writing that he also published on social media. So just to share the experience, as you say, from an African man, which was which he find very exclusive and unusual, and also to explain how much this meant for his child, for his wife, and for himself.
Oh, can you share with us what exactly? Yeah.
My good colleague Stephen Chimalu, and I will share some key sentences here. So he started off this email. Hello, employers and parent employees in Africa and elsewhere. For the first time, as a human being, an employee, a parent, and a man, I had what I considered required time to experience, feel, touch, and see details of errands and complications around care of a fresh-growing child. I wish I had the same for the 2 other children we had. For 4 good full months of a fresh child, as a working class, I was exposed to another side of life of a woman that men don't probably know, and if we know, we probably don't care and acknowledge. On the 4th month of the child, my wife had to report back to work, and it was my turn to assume the role the women are forced to execute even when men have the time to support. Many thanks to the Embassy of Sweden in Tanzania, who willingly contextualized its foreign human resources policy on maternity and paternity leave to allow Tanzanians or local employees to take up to 6 months maternal and paternal leave to care for the first 6 months of the baby. The 4 months of embassy's time allowed me to establish connection and the bond with the baby. It allowed me to proudly exempt my beautiful wife from worrying about the baby left at home. It allowed me to appreciate my wife and other women who exceedingly go beyond national limitation to provide family at its best. It allowed me as an African man to challenge my personal ego that is largely influenced by culture and tradition. I will never forget, and probably never will again, get the chance to experience bathing a fresh baby, massaging, cleaning and dressing up, feeding the baby from mother's preserved milk, sleepless nights of care, witnessing little smiles from a small baby, and lastly, not forgetting the memories of a long-waited smile of my wife on her return from work every day. Quite a strong testimony.
It is. And I think the last part nailed it, as in when the wife comes in, you're like, I got this, don't worry, you don't have to worry about anything. I think that's a life-changing experience for him.
That too changes the whole dynamic between the husband and the wife, and the roles, the roles that men and women play in their families. You know, him having experienced very hands-on parenting, especially in Tanzania, that's a rare rare sighting for a man, a Tanzanian man, to have a very active parenting role, like the one that he did. You know, he had to play both. He had to take over basically the parenting when his wife went back to work. So that's really an eye-opening experience. I mean, it also gets him to empathize with his wife a lot more. He gets to see what it is like to actually be there full-time with a newborn child. This really shifts the dynamic when in the relationship. It shifts one's perspective and worldview about what it means to be a full-time parent while still having a full-time job, you know, or being actively involved in the day-to-day upbringing of a child, of an infant. The demands are quite high. So I'm sure he's quite a changed man after that experience, because after having to experience that for 6 months, you said, is quite life-changing. I mean, it will be interesting to see the difference between the children raised, the children he had initially before he had this privilege, compared to this child now that the child got to experience the parenting from both the mother and the father being very hands-on and very active. So it'll be really nice to see how these children grow up and if there will be any differences between the two. That'll be quite an interesting thing to see.
I would love to get him on the podcast one day if he's willing to just come and
I'm sure he would. Huh?
Yeah, just to come and speak on details about, because it is one thing that we don't speak about at all as men. And is there anything else that you want to add that you feel like we haven't touched that you would like to address as well?
I think we have covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
I think we need to continue to continue this conversation in many different ways. I think men needs to come together more often to have serious conversations about gender-based violence and why it's important to address this topic, and that the responsibility for gender-based violence doesn't lie with the victims, but it lies with the man as a category. So that would be my overall conclusion about this very and perhaps one of the most important topic. And as I said, it is a pandemic. It continues to rage out there all over the world, and until it's over, we need to continue to talk about it.
Nadia?
The takeaway for me is that as men, we need to start having these conversations. We need to, to openly discuss these things, to start seeing how we can move from being dinosaurs who are about to go extinct to start evolving. I mean, let's all adapt the mindset or strategy of a cockroach, because cockroaches survived. I think, according to scientists, cockroaches have existed since the time of the dinosaur, but the cockroach is still here. So I know it's not pretty, but let's aim to be cockroaches. And men, let's talk. Let's have these conversations. Let's open up. Let's see how we can be part of the solution. I know no one likes to be called a problem. I know that from a psychologist's point of view as well. Problem kids don't like to be called problem kids. That only leads them to be more of a problem. And so let's start moving from that side, that men are seen as problems, because our society today, that's how we're looking at men, that men are the problem, men are the leading perpetrators of GBV. How can we shift to this is men are part of the solution? And I say we men because in our podcast I am a man by association, and I'm putting myself in men's shoes every day when I'm speaking here, so I think I've earned the title of saying we.
Yes, you have.
We men.
Yes, you have.
So yeah, let's talk. Let's have more of these conversations. Let's listen more to this podcast, because it is life-changing for all of us. And yeah, let's be better. We have the potential to do more, to be more. We have the potential to be a solution rather than a problem. So let's go out and do it. Let's prove the world wrong, because the world believes men are dinosaurs and they're unable to change. But that's a lie. We survived till today. So let's talk.
So yeah, kama umesikiliza podcast yetu leo, this is what we are talking about. This is what Men the podcast is all about. Tunajaribu kuunpack na kuweka maongezi kama haya mbele zaidi kwa sababu in public zaidi, ili watu wasikie na watu waelewe zaidi, kwa sababu these are the things ambavyo vinatu affect all men, especially Tanzanian men. These things vinatu affect sana, and that's why we say kila siku kwamba we are trying to unlearn and unpack, because we've been raised to believe kwamba this is how men should be, but then some of the things have relate na uhalisia ambao tupo now. So yeah, so if you're listening, or if you've listened to this episode, first of all, send us your comment on @menthepodcast on Twitter and on Instagram. But pili, it could start with you, you know. Inaweza kaanza kwako, take the initiative, try to find a way ya kuweza kuaddress, try to find a way ya have conversation around this thing, try to find a way ya kuweza how to make you a better person. So yeah, till next time, mimi naitwa Michael Baruti. Nadia was here as always. It has been great. Till next time, we're out.
Men, the podcast.